Daniel, do you have a question?
Yeah, a quick question before we continue. Uh, so I wanted to know, why are we using React? How does it differ from other frameworks like Angular or,
Um,
yeah.
they have different. So okay, so good question. That's actually there's actually two pieces to that question. I'm glad you asked. So the first answer to why do we use React, or let me talk about why we use any framework at all. Okay, and I had touched on this a little bit yesterday. And we typically use frameworks because the applications that we're going to build are still bigger yet than quite a bit bigger than the biggest application that we've already built in our assignments or projects or exercises. So in the real world, we're building way larger applications. And you probably felt how difficult it can be to manage a code base that's growing in complexity with a lot of different moving parts, right? Did you all feel that at some point that as our applications are getting more complex, there's a lot more moving parts in our code, a lot more disorganization, a lot more of like, oh shit, where does this go again? What does this do? And as the complexity and the size of the application grows, we need to add some pieces of organization to help us keep things in an organized manner. In addition, it also brings different concepts, different ideas of how an app, like not different ideas, but ideas in general. Currently, we have no concepts about how we should organize our code. We talk about functions and we talk about variables, but we don't actually have any structure to our applications. We did a little bit in object-oriented programming, but those concepts are coming back right now, okay? In addition, it adds a lot of features, a lot of cool things, and a lot of different ways of managing big projects. We may not feel the total value of React in this course. You may look back at this course after and say, I don't know why I would ever use React. I didn't really get why I would choose that over just vanilla JavaScript. And and that's okay, right? But trust me, over the long run, over big projects, the value is there. Now, comparing it to Angular, why would we pick one versus the other? They're competitors, right? And there's the three big competitors in this space are Angular, Vue, and React. Those are the three big ones in this space. Now,
I actually read something about that yesterday.
yeah,
Isn't Angular a framework and React.js just a library?
yeah, they're,
I heard the exact same thing too.
Yeah,
but
and
like,
the React.js. Oh, sorry.
but honestly, they're very different, but they're so similar in what they're doing. They're bringing interactive components to the web page. They're another level, an abstraction layer, a framework, a way of writing JavaScript. Yeah, technically, yes, one's a framework, one's a library. But like, what does that mean to you?
Well, React.js has it manipulates the view, but the Angular is actually it has a works with view layer. So you can combine the two,
Yeah.
but it's not replaceable to Angular.
You
Like
would
React Native can combine them, but sorry.
You would never use both of them. You would
Really?
you would never use React and Angular together. Which to me,
what is the React Native thing?
React Native allows you to create mobile applications.
They are actually working on something together. Angular to native. It's actually Angular.
So everything, you will find anything and everything out there. Okay, like it is. Just remember, it's the internet. People are like, hey, let's take this and take that and boom, right? And like some things catch, and some
I got
things don't.
fooled.
No,
Okay.
no. I'm not saying you got fooled. I'm just saying, like, yes, I don't doubt that you found a project that says Angular to native. Is that a thing? Angular to native. Running in a native mobile app using NativeScript, nativescript.org. Yeah, native mobile and native desktop. Yeah, I haven't done a lot of Angular, but okay, so React Native is allows you to write native mobile applications using Angular, one framework, mobile and desktop. Maybe they updated to Angular. Like I said, I haven't been following Angular very much. React Native is a framework that allows you to develop native desktop, native mobile applications in React and JavaScript. So you want to develop an Android app that's available in the Android store, right? Not a web application, a native Android app, something that someone downloads and installs, but you don't know Java, or you want to write one for iOS, but you don't know Objective-C or Swift, okay? You can write it in React Native. Quite a few, one of the companies that we work with does that. So some of the students who go get internships end up going to write React Native and building mobile applications. Yeah, that's what React Native is. Okay, so Angular, Vue, React, those are the three big competitors. Okay, they differ in how they approach everything. They differ in their not only how they approach things, but their beliefs about how this should work. But they're kind of all doing the same thing in the end, right? Which is adding JavaScript to a page to make it what you might call reactive, right? Or more interactive, delivering a different way of delivering data, a different way of accessing data stores, which could be a database or something, right? But they're kind of all doing the same thing, okay? So Angular is the other big one. If you're looking for a job, Angular's there. But I mean, once you pick up one, you can pick up any. I would say Angular might be a little bit more difficult, but that's just me. Any other questions? Good questions. Okay, so let's take a look at our exercise for yesterday, and let's go through it. Okay, so yesterday I asked you to build a restaurant app, and people will be able to go to our site and check out restaurants found in our neighborhood. I think I'm going to continue with this over time. I think it can get a little bit tricky sometimes to try to target specific learning outcomes that I want with this particular one, but we'll find out. So we're going to create a brand new React app. Okay, so I'm going to pop on over here. And I think yesterday I cloned it. I didn't. Okay. Let's do 260. Yeah, I did. I created that template, right? This template. So I did an npx create React app, and then I copied that. Now I can do that. You can do that because really the whole idea behind this is that all the node modules are included in here. So if I copy this, it contains everything that it needs. Okay, now you don't have to do this. This isn't a requirement. This is just something I came up with as an idea yesterday because I thought it would save time. So I'm going to use this template that's installed here. The only problem is if any of those node packages have updated between yesterday and today, I wouldn't get any of those updates. That's okay with me. Okay, Because remember, whenever we're doing a package install, we're actually pulling it down from the internet. And we're likely pulling down the newest versions of all of them. And if I don't install and pull down new versions, I'm just using old versions, which is fine. Lots of people use old stuff because it's tested and stable. Okay, a lot of people are resistant to using new things because it may be untested. Like untested means yes, it's tested, but not enough real world testing, not enough people using it in the real world. So I'm going to copy recursively template. Okay, and I'll call it, I guess, exercise 1. And this will take about a minute and a half.
Would it make sense to delete all those test files before you copy it?
Those test files don't really, yes, it would. Those test files don't add a lot of weight. I was going to do that. Yeah, it would, because that way tomorrow when I copy it, I don't have to go through the process of deleting those test files again.
If my template was just like that, would it make any difference?
It wouldn't be any faster. You don't technically need to delete anything if you don't want to. Everything would just work fine. I just wanted to show you yesterday what we don't really need. Because like the less files that are there, the less opportunity there are there, less opportunities there are to be confused. Right? But yeah, totally. Because if I deleted them, then when I copy it this time, they won't exist in there. The part that takes the longest to copy is the node modules folder. That's what's taking so long. It's not the size, it's the quantity. Opening one file that's large and copying it is way faster than opening 1,000 tiny files. Opening and closing takes a lot of time. So there we go, we have exercise 1. And yes, you are right. We should probably go ahead and delete some of these files. So we don't need service worker. We don't need setup tests. And we don't need app.tests.js. So we can just take those away. Actually, we also don't need logo.svg because that's just for the sample. We don't need that either. Okay, and these are all going to change anyways. I'm not going to delete them because they have some nice templating already in them, but they're all going to change anyways. So usually what I like to do when I start, I either like to get 2 tabs open if you can support tabbing in your terminal. Okay, I have 2 tabs open, or make sure you do this, code dot. Okay, you want to code dot before you run your server. Okay, because once you run your server, if you, sorry, I'm stuck here. There we go. Jeez. Trying to bring this up to my other screen and it doesn't want to go. There we go. Okay. If you code dot and then you run your server, okay, because once you start running your server, npm start. This is probably one of the things you're going to do at the earliest is start your server, okay, and this is so that way you can see your changes right away. Now the server's running, I can't go and open the code. Okay, unless I have either another tab open, which is fine, or the server, or kill the server, and then I start it again. So this is going to take apparently a million years. For those of you using Macs, is it way faster than this?
Yeah.
I miss my Mac so much. Okay, so while this is starting out, we'll pop open our code here, okay? And we'll take a look at our app.js and our index.js. So we'll open these two, okay? So first of all, I don't need any of this stuff, right? This is all templatey stuff, right? This is all stuff that comes with React that I don't need. Right, it doesn't come with React, this comes with Create React App. Remember, Create React App brings a bunch of stuff to the party and it creates that little sample application with the spinning React logo. Okay, and that's what this is. We don't need any of this. This is what we need right here. And actually, I said I don't need logo.svg, so we're gonna take that away too. And over here, index, we don't need service worker. We don't need service worker. Okay, everything else is fine. In terms of CSS and stuff, now obviously this is not going to work. Okay, in terms of CSS, this is fine. Okay, you could probably get rid of that. Body with margin 0 on it, that's probably okay. Okay. And then index app.css, we don't need any of that. We're going to be writing our own. Okay. So we pretty much just emptied everything. Now, you might be thinking, like, shouldn't they just create a React app with everything empty? And I agree. I was looking for something that will generate a React app with nothing in it, so we can just start blank. But I can't find one. I think I'm going to write my own for next year because I don't like having all this extra stuff in there. But it is what it is. Okay, so the goal was to write our restaurants. So let me go back over here. So obviously we have some errors that we're going to fix. Create a brand new React app. We did that. Okay, we took out all the stuff that we didn't need. Make sure that you're able to identify everything. Now, remember, we're going to be working in source SRC. Public is, again, where our index.html is located, okay? And that's simply the structure of Create React App. It may be different depending on the different application, but what essentially is going to happen is it's going to combine these JavaScript files here and these CSS files, kind of like using Gulp, kind of like the way we use Gulp. It's going to combine them, compress them, minify them, okay? And then it's going to inject them into this index.html, and it's going to produce something in the end. And actually, you can see, we can actually generate that output if we wanted to, so that way we don't have to use React, the server anymore. We can just double click on the HTML file, it just opens in our browser. We'll do that at the end today, so you get to see how that looks, okay? Excuse me. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to replace app.js with a new file called restaurants.js. Update the application as necessary so we can make sure that it supports this change. Okay, so we want to replace or rename app.js. Okay, so the reason I chose and asked you to do this is because it forces you to make a bunch of changes in this application, a bunch of tiny little changes that might help you identify how this is all put together. So if I want, I can't simply just rename this file. Oh, I can simply or just rename this file, but I shouldn't just rename this file. If I call it restaurants.js, oh, interesting. It asks if I want to update the imports. Okay, sure. So you'll notice that instead of import app from app, it now says import app from restaurants, because it asked me if I wanted to update the, but yours probably says this still. And obviously this is no longer valid because I don't have app anymore. It is now called restaurants, right? So I need to change this to match that. This is the file name. restaurants. And is it still app? Maybe I should call it restaurant to reflect what it is. Okay, please stop me anytime you have questions.
What about that line 8 app?
Yeah, and I need to change that too, because it said app, 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 but now it's restaurants, restaurants, restaurants. So I need to change that too. Now, part of this is also this. If I export app, I can't import restaurants, right? This has to match this. And so I should.
Sorry, John, is that default export? So I thought you can rename it to.
Yeah, you can. Sorry, you're right. Yeah, export default allows you to rename it because default means whatever you import, you're exporting the default. You should update this. Okay, so this should match this.
Wait, if that stays, oh, okay.
Okay.
If that stays up, can we call import app from restaurant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which you probably don't want to do, right? Like you probably want to rename all instances of the word app to restaurants, to whatever it is, because we want to have that consistency. We want to have that organization. Because by the time we're done here, we're not going to have 1 or 2 files. We're going to have 10 or 12 files. Okay, we're going to have 10 to 12 files in here. And so we want to maintain this consistent organization. So everywhere we see the word app, we're going to replace it with restaurants. It is now restaurants.css. Okay, so I'm going to rename app.css to restaurants.css. Okay, there. Now it's all done. Now it doesn't do anything, but you'll see it now loads restaurants from restaurant. So it's importing, restaurants is exporting, restaurant, restaurants, restaurants function restaurants, okay, component restaurant, restaurants being loaded into root. So that's part 1. Any questions on that? In all of the exercises I give you, I'm going to ask you to do some CSS. You don't have to. It's kind of more of a good opportunity to keep practicing. So yesterday I said there was some back and forth. I had initially planned to give you CSS, but the problem is if I give you CSS and you don't have the HTML, it's kind of hard because you have to make your HTML exactly the way I did it in order to make it look the same way, as opposed to if I just give you a mock-up, you would just have to write the CSS on your own. But so going forward, unless I specify specifically, I'll probably give you HTML mock-up, like export some HTML with some CSS and then say, here, take this and apply it, break it down the way you see fit. Okay, next. Copy and paste the JS object below into your restaurants file, loop over it, and render all the restaurants into a single HTML page. Okay, so we have our function. Okay, it's just like any other function, which means inside this function, I can declare things. So I just created a new const called list, and I want to print it out. How do I print things out? Well, I print things out by returning them as JSX from this component function. Okay, so this function here must return JSX. Okay. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. something I didn't mention yesterday is that if I can create, remember, JSX here is a first class citizen in here. I can just declare JSX anywhere. It is considered JavaScript. Okay, I don't need to put anything around it. I can just say const rest equals restaurants. And then over here, I can return rest. Okay, I can literally do this because I am returning a variable that contains JSX, right? And this will print out this header right here. Now, so having said that, how can I print out all of these? Well, maybe I can loop over them. That's what I asked you to do, right? So let's do a for const rest of list restaurant list, and we'll do a, let's see, let rest equals, let's rest JSX equal empty string. Okay, and then we'll do restaurant.
Hey, John.
Oh, yes.
For empty string on JSX, do you have to use double quotes or can you use backtick still for JSX?
Try it. Okay, restaurant or rest JSX plus equals restaurant. So actually, what do we want to do? We want to do we want to do name, right? Sorry, div. I guess we'll start with a div. And then we'll go with an image, right, an image tag. After that, right, if you remember correctly, let's take a look at what we're building here, mockup. So we probably need, each one of these is a div with a name. So div, image, name, div, image, name. So div surrounding both of these, right? And then we'll put it together all in one big div after, something like that, okay? So we have, so maybe we could start off with a div, right? Like a container. Oh, but we can't. So we'll start off with an empty div, and at the end, we'll add another div to it, okay? So for this is the full container. So this is the whole thing. This is the whole, this whole area here, okay? That's this div. Otherwise, we're putting divs around each one. This is kind of a nice little application here. Okay, we're putting divs around each one. Okay. So divs around each one, and then this is the start of the outer div up here. Okay, and then the bottom one closes it up, so we get that other div. Now we're going to do image src equals, and we're going to do this. And it's restaurant dot image, okay? And then we're going to put the name, right? We'll just do this, restaurant dot name. Cool. And now let's return that. See how that works. And, that's not really what I would expect, right? What did it do?
It prints out the string.
It literally just printed, yeah, it literally just printed out the string.
Could you put the quotes around it?
Well, this is not JSX. Yeah.
Right.
No, this is just a string, right? This is not JSX. This is just a string. Can I do this instead, maybe? All right, so I took them out of the strings, get rid of these dollar signs, and loop through it like that. Now, does this work? Let's take a look. Restaurant is not defined. It doesn't like this. It doesn't like that. It's got a little problem here. You can see the problem because it starts getting the colors of the syntax highlighting start getting screwed up. They start getting messed up, right? It's not syntax highlighting this, and it's mainly because it's missing the closing. Right? Once I put the closing on there, then it starts to work. But the problem is that if I put the closing on there, then I'm not able to insert it inside. Let's check to see if this works anyways. I get object, 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 object. So again, it's not what I'm looking for, okay? You'll know that if you, so let me just actually put an empty string here, or empty JSX, okay? And see if we can get this working. Again, object, object, undefined, object, 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 object. Can't get it out. If you did any research yesterday, okay, you would have found that there's actually a couple ways. One, we can create a bunch of, for each one of these, we can create a object. We can put it inside a variable and just print out that variable. Alternatively, that's a terrible way, we can actually set this to be an array. So JSX is very, very happy to print out arrays of JSX. So instead of plus equals, which actually ends at plus equals, is not available on JSX. It's available on strings, it's available on numbers, but it's not available on JSX. So instead, we're going to do a push, and we're going to add it to the array, the empty array. And then we're going to return that empty array as JSX. Okay, now let's take a look at how that looks. Okay, so it's not an empty array anymore. We added pieces of JSX. So what we end up with is an array filled with JSX objects. Okay, because that's what these are, right? It's got stuff in it. And then we're pushing onto it. And then we can return that array filled with JSX. This concept, so this is where what I didn't tell you yesterday. This concept is extremely important to understand in React. Returning an array of JSX is extremely common and something that we do a lot of. Okay. Now, having said that, I don't have to only return that. I can return a div with that array inside of it. Right? This is considered JSX still. So I'm putting in this div with this array filled with JSX. So let's take a look at that. Now it doesn't look any different because obviously that div doesn't do anything. But if I were to give this div a class, and then made it went over here, restaurants.css, and said, what did I call it? .restaurants. And said display, something that we haven't talked about, display grid. Okay, we've never learned display grid, but it's very similar to Flexbox, except it allows me to specify how many items in a grid. So I can say grid template columns, and we'll say 100 pixels, 100 pixels. And in addition, we'll say the images are width 100%. And any restaurant. So this will give us a better idea. There we go. So you can see that that div does indeed exist. Okay, so this div that I wrap the whole thing in, the restaurants div, right over here, does indeed exist. And I'm able to render this JSX inside of here. Okay. And obviously we have some CSS over here that's being implemented, okay, because of this import up here. Remember, we have this list remember, look, this is just a function and we're doing logic in here and then we're simply returning JSX. Remember, we can only return one JSX element, which actually is really strange why I was able to return this array. But that's, I would have to look into that. Any questions on this? So this demonstration is to show you that like we're just working in JavaScript here. This is just JavaScript. It's got some weird properties about it. That JSX is not a string. We can't plus equals it, but we can do other things with it. I can also decide if restaurant dot name contains includes if it includes an S, don't put it in there, right? Like you can make logical choices too with your stuff. Okay, so if the name includes an S, don't put it in there. That's going to be most restaurants. Oh, well, I guess that's an uppercase S. So now we're down to 6 restaurants. Okay, so we can do any sort of logic here, which allows us to reduce the amount of things in our output. Or change, or do whatever. We can modify it however we want, right? That's what I'm trying to demonstrate, is we can do anything we want here, anything we want here. This is just JavaScript, as long as we return JSX. And JSX cannot be concatenated like a string. It needs to be either a single JSX object, like I had shown you with this, const A equals h1 stuff, right? Or, and then we can output that, or, so either simple JSX object or an array of JSX objects. These are JSX objects. Okay, that is what it has to be. It can't be concatenated like a string. Now, pause here for questions.
Hi. I know this first question, you might want to bring your pitchfork to stick me with. At first, my HTML, when I opened it on Chrome, it didn't run anything, like including the actual sample app that I didn't touch at all.
When you open this?
Yeah, when I opened that public index HTML, it didn't have anything, not any of the Atom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Why would it? What's in here?
That I didn't figure it out. I just erased everything. I just followed one of the
No, because that's not how we run this, right? We don't run this by opening this index.html. We run this with npm start. right?
Oh,
running this
that's
from over
why
here.
it worked. Oh, I didn't know where. Okay.
Okay, so just a reminder, these lectures are extremely important because I'm going to show you how to do things. And the looking it up on your own is just like you do need to do research, but the amount of information out there is going to drive you in very, very different ways because there's a million ways to do this. Even
Yes.
documentation doesn't have this information. So you need to npm start this thing, okay? Because we're using Create React App. If we weren't using Create React App, you would have to do something different. Can you just write React inside HTML? Yes, you can, okay? I can show you that to give you a sense of what it looks like and why we probably don't want to. Actually, I will do that in 2 seconds. Okay, let's finish this up. Great question, actually. Yeah, so this doesn't include anything. This is also a template. Okay,
I was afraid you were gonna kill me because like I didn't ask you any question about that yesterday. I was trying to figure it out on my own.
You can, yeah, fine, no problem. Any other questions? Now, I'm not done with this, okay? I'm not done with this. I know there's some stuff I can improve and I can change.
Sorry, John.
Yep.
Can I? Can you turn on the web page, and see the console log?
Yeah. So other things we need to talk about here.
Okay.
And that's this thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So any other questions? So we'll talk about that in a second. Okay. So piece number 1. We're not done here yet. The way that we're doing this, while it's excellent for demonstration purposes, is not ideal and is not typical. Okay. One of the reasons why I would like to do this is because I want to show you, again, we're just using JavaScript. Okay. We're building in it. The only new weird thing is this JSX stuff. Okay. But we're just building an array of it. Okay. With regular JavaScript stuff, regular JavaScript. Okay. This is not typical. The typical way is doing this, and we're used to this. Remember, I said we can either render one JSX element, just like this, or an array of JSX elements. What array prototype method, what array method do we know generates what array method do we know generates an array?
Map.
Okay, so here are some methods that we know of in array.prototype that allows us to generate new arrays, right? So yes, we can just put this array out, list, like I can just say list, but list is not JSX, right? List is JSON. This is not JSX, this is JSON. We need an array, okay. We need an array of JSX. So we need to convert this JSON to JSX somehow, to like a custom JSX. So we need to take an array and output an array and do some manipulation. So we had mentioned map takes an array and outputs an array. What else do we know? Which other ones?
Filter.
Splice,
Yeah.
Filter, slide.
Reduce.
Slice.
Yep. Well, reduce can do anything. It can output anything. Okay. You won't see reduce too much. Right. Slice. Okay. All of these operate on arrays, which means we can go like some array.map, and it outputs an array. So this is a map and filter are extremely common to do something like this. So this is what it ends up looking like. We are in JSX right now. So we need to go into JavaScript. So it usually starts like this. Pay close attention here. Okay. And there we go. You can come back here. All right. This is common. So let's break this down. So I'm in JSX. I want to switch into JavaScript because I want to loop over that array, and I want to generate a new array from the JSON and convert it into some sort of JSX. So I map over it because map returns, this will end up being an array, right? Map returns an array. And it's going to be whatever map takes the return value of every time over the loop and puts that into the new element of the array. Now, there is no return on here because of the arrow function. The arrow function automatically returns the first statement when you don't have parentheses, curly braces. If you put curly braces on it, then I must manually return it. But then again, we had said this doesn't look very good, so we put braces on it to make it look better. But I don't like how this looks either, because now we're getting kind of carried away here. So I would rather just take this brace off and let it naturally return. Like that, a little bit cleaner. So we're in JSX, we go into JavaScript, we're mapping over this stuff. We go back into JSX. We don't need to tell it we're going back into JSX. Unlike we need to tell it we're going into JavaScript, we don't need to tell it we're going back into JSX. We just go into JSX. And then we can start going, and then we can go back into JavaScript inside of this. Okay, we can go into JavaScript, into JSX, into JavaScript, into JSX, into JavaScript, right? We could just keep going. And then we go back into JavaScript, print that out, back into JavaScript, JSX again. And we end up printing out that whole thing. This piece of code here, this concept is critical to understand. Absolutely, this is what the whole rest of your course hinges on, is do you understand this concept? Not just can you replicate this, but do you understand what is happening and how this works? Because it's not just going to be you just redo the same thing over and over and over again. You have to think, you will need to think about what this is going to look like. Questions on the syntax, questions on what the hell is going on here?
Hi, John.
Yeah.
Is there any method that can take tab conversion, that convert the string to the JSX?
I don't know. I haven't seen one, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. String to JSX. I haven't seen it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm sure it does exist. I'm sure something like that exists.
Hey, John, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an extension of what Surveyor has encountered before. Since we need npm start to, let's say, load the page, I wonder how does a user can like view this kind of page?
All right, so let me take care of that in a minute or a couple minutes. Let me just get through any more questions directly related to this. I'll add one more thing, and then we'll look at what the output of a React app actually is. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Any more questions on specifically this? Okay, so last piece is we have this. So we got all these things out there. You probably write some better CSS than what I have here. Warning, each child in a list, so this is not an error, this is a warning. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. You're gonna come, and then it says, check the render method of restaurants. See React warning keys for more information, okay? I'll tell you what this is, and I'll tell you why we need it. When we are so React is really, really good at updating things in the DOM. That's its specialty, is updating the DOM. The thing is, it needs IDs. And we were doing this before. We were putting these little data attributes on elements so we knew information about them when we pulled them back and put them into the DOM and pulled them out of the DOM, right? So we added our own little IDs before. Do you remember that? Right? React needs that too. Okay, React needs that too. React needs to know which ones it's dealing with individually. So there's 9 restaurants here, and there's nothing on the restaurant that uniquely identifies each restaurant. Yeah, it has a name, yeah, it has an image, but React wants us to explicitly tell it, here is something you can trust that uniquely identifies each restaurant. And so they want what's called a key. And we would put that at this level here. So we're looping over restaurants, and each one we're outputting is a div. It wants a key to uniquely identify it. And so something that is unique for each restaurant. Now, if we had an ID in here, that would be great. That's what I would use. Restaurant.id, perfect. Okay. If we don't, you're gonna have to come up with your own. It could be restaurant.name, but you have to make sure this is unique. Okay, you have to make sure this is unique. Could be restaurant.name, but restaurant.name, there are multiple McDonald's, there are multiple Montanas, so restaurant.name is probably not good. For this case, I'm going to use something that guarantees uniqueness. I don't know if you remember, but map, just like for each, just like filter, just like all those array methods, it goes element, index, array as properties. So we can get the index of the element that we're looping through. So this is going to be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, and that's the key that I'm going to assign it. So that gives a unique ID to each one. Not the best way, but it's a way for this case. And that will get rid of that error, okay? And in the future, when we learn how to update these things using React, okay, React will know which one to go update because it will say, oh, I need to go update the one with ID 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I need to update this one. And React will figure that out. Okay. So that whenever we're looping over something like this and outputting JSX, we need to have a key on it every single time. Otherwise, that warning will pop up and the warning doesn't stop the app from working though. The problem is if we don't have it, if we don't change it, you're going to get really weird results. I guarantee it. Okay. You're going to expect something to update and something different is going to update because you don't have this unique key.
Is it able to generate key automatically? So we just do it manually?
No, in the future, we're just going to put IDs on things. Yeah. Maybe tonight we'll put indexes, but in the future, generally, we're going to have some sort of ID, some sort of unique identifier already on it. Most of the things you deal with in programming have IDs on them already. So we're going to use those. But for now, I just want to show you this. Again, I need a 12-hour crash course to show you everything, but yeah. Okay.
Does the attribute name also have to be key? Can we just call it like data set? Or no?
No, it
just
has to be key. Yeah, and actually, if you go look at the output here, it says...
Doesn't show.
No, it doesn't show.
Amazing.
Yeah. There is a special... there is a special React. Interesting. It's actually very interesting. I would have expected it to show, actually. There is a special React thing that we can use to see everything. A special React plugin that we can put in our browser to see a lot of stuff. We'll take a look at that later. And you will be able to see the keys through there. Okay, so what the heck, like, let's talk about the big question that a couple of you have had. How's this working? Like, what role does this index.html play? What role, how do the people end up seeing it in the end? And the answer is a lot of the React, this is where the tool chains happen, right? We develop on our machine in a very different way than we produce something then we hit a button and we run gulp and we output something, right? That's what we did in the last course. That's what the last course was meant to show you, that the way that we develop locally is different than the stuff that we produce for output, right? So we have these like tools that help us automatically reload, that help us do these imports and exports and work in multiple files. But at the end of the day, we are generating one index.html file, CSS and JavaScript. That is it. All this other stuff is just fluff. It is meant for us to be part of our development workflow. How do we output this? And the answer is, wait, I need to actually take a quick look at something because I forget output root directory React app. Use custom folder, and that is homepage. There we go. So I'm going to have to do this just so I can show you properly. Okay, so here it is. We're going to go into here. We're going to kill our server. And Create React App has 4 scripts, standard scripts. Start, npm start, the one that we've been using. Test to run the tests. Eject, don't worry about that. And build. Now, you're never going to do this in this course, but in real life, build takes all the stuff that we've been working on here and these templates and outputs something. Outputs our build, the build that we use for the internets. Watch. Creating an optimized production build. So a build that we put on our production server, i.e. the server that actually serves it to everyone. They don't need to have, we don't expect everyone to have all this stuff set up. This is not how we review websites, right? So now we end up with a new directory build. It's the dist directory, okay? It's exactly the dist directory. In here, we have a bunch of junk, okay? But we also have index.html, which if we open, is minified, okay? I'm going to format it. There we go. And it's got a ton of stuff written, okay? It's got, it should have a root element, one root element. It has our manifest, it has our CSS, and it has our JS loaded at the end, okay? And we'll reveal in Finder, Explorer. We'll double click on it. There we go. Now, this doesn't make any sense to me. And this, if we look at these JavaScript files, static JS, these don't make any sense to me either. This is what our JavaScript compiled to, okay? This is the magic of a tool chain, is that we write JavaScript in a way that we can understand and a way that makes sense, and we connect it together in a way that works for us, and then we output something in a way that is optimized for delivery over the internet in a way that we don't intentionally make it unreadable. We intentionally break it into chunks, compress it by taking away all the spaces and all the extra lines, okay? And inject it into a template that we created before, which is this index.html. This is just a template. This is just a template for us, but the output is something different, okay? And then we take this and we upload it to the internet, and now it's available for everyone. So if I took this and I pushed it to GitHub and I said, GitHub pages here, it would work. Now, does GitHub run React? No, but React is just JavaScript. All this is, in the end, is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That's all it is. But we have all these other pieces on top of it for doing development locally that make it easier for us. Because if I were to show you how to actually do React in real life, it's painful. It is extremely painful. Would you like to see? Without all this tool stuff, I'll show you how to do React in real life without all this tool stuff. All right. So we're going to do a quick, let's just do. All right, so to do React in real life, you would need to do something like this. Without any of this fancy create React app stuff. Source would be app.js. Okay. Now you would need to go and get React. So we're going to have to get React. So we're going to have to import React, get started. Try React. CDN links. Here we go. So we have React development. Okay. So just like we were pulling in other things, we would have to pull in React. Do I have to get React DOM too? And React DOM. So we need both. React and React DOM. Okay, there we go. So we pulled them both in. Now I can start using React in here because I have it available. So we cannot use JSX. JSX does not exist because we need something to convert JSX. JSX is like, it's only for development. It's only for us. Instead of JSX, we have to do this. Let's see. I'm gonna have to go to the documentation here. API React DOM elements. React create. React without JSX. Okay, so here. So we have a React render. Okay, same thing, React DOM render. Instead of JSX, this is what we need to do. React create element. Give it the name of the element. Give it the type of the element. Oof, this is brutal. Let's do this. Okay, give it the type of the element, a div. Give it some properties for the element, and then give it the content of the element. Now, if this had children element, we would have to put React create element inside here as well. So this is regular React, okay? This is regular React. This is, oh shoot. This is React without JSX. And then we'd have to put in index.html div ID. Okay, so now this works, should work. Fill in sidebar. It's got an error. Cannot read property too wide. Oh. There we go. That's React. So JSX helps us by not having to do this, create React element, because this is extremely difficult to make an entire web page with. Okay, this is essentially just doing this. With JSX, we could have just done this. And if we wanted to put something else in here, now it gets even more difficult because now we would need to do this. And you can see how out of control this can start to get with React create element. In addition, we're only operating in one file. So we don't have that nice ability to break these things down into separate files like we were getting before, logically. In addition, we don't get any browser reloading out of this. We have to manually come here and reload our browser. In addition, we don't get any benefits of this build process where we're building a production app that is optimized. This is not optimized. In addition to that, we would have to add some sort of like build tool like Gulp to do this for us. Okay, so Create React App does all of that for us already. it gives us this nice separate method of creating our files. It gives us this way that we can write JSX instead of this bad old React stuff. It gives us the ability to glue our files together. It gives us all these new things, but there's a little bit of a learning curve. Okay, but you could literally just write React like this if you wanted to, but you can't write it. You can't write JSX. Trade-off. Questions, comments? I'm surprised. Nothing?
Why are you surprised?
I am surprised that I was expecting more. Okay, that's fine. All right, so let's take a break. 10:05. Let's come back and we'll do the next piece. Okay, we'll talk about the next step. Come back at 20 after 10, and I'll see you shortly. Okay. Sorry, I had a little snack. Okay, so today, what we're going to do is we are going to, close this, I think. Yeah. Close this, close this, close this, close this. Okay. So today, we're going to build this. Ooh, right. And I'll just steal some CSS. I've got some CSS already. Okay, nothing too extravagant, but it's going to detail some concepts today that I want to show you. Okay, so to do this, we're going to, I've already created a new application from yesterday, so that way I don't need to make it today. Sample app. Sample. Okay. So I haven't gone through yet and purged all those files I don't need, but I'll go through it right now and do that. And this up here. Okay, cool. There we go. So I'm going to purge those files that we don't need, get rid of this test file, right click, delete, yep. Service worker, and this one, right click both of those and delete, great. Don't need this logo.svg, right click that, delete permanently, yep, that's good. Oh, whoa, I deleted the wrong one. It doesn't go to your, that's fine. I'll copy one from the other. So we're gonna copy exercise 1 dot restaurants src index.js into in-class sample src index.js. So we'll just copy that over. There we go. Cool, we got that now. We got that back. All right, so we have our 4 things here. Okay, so when we're building a React app, it's pretty common to obviously be changing a lot of these things. App is a fine top level name. So like I said, index, we're usually not going to change very much. If we do, we're just going to be changing it in the same way that we changed it this morning, which is we're probably going to change this particular line 3, and we're going to change this, assuming that we changed this app. Now, in this course, you may not need to, but in real life, you may. It has a lot to do with just naming. like how we are naming things in terms of file organization. I like to treat this as though it's the main entry point into our application. That's how I like to look at it. And as such, app might be a very reasonable name, okay? For us, I think it'll be fine. So today we're going to learn about creating multiple files, okay? So we only have one file right now, and I had mentioned by the end of this React course, we're gonna have multiple files, okay? But also remember, our goal is to create this, okay? This sort of thing. Okay, it's going to be a list of, let's call this a contact list, okay? Contact list. So we're going to create a contact list. Obviously, we're going to need some contacts. And actually, I have some contacts available, okay, already for us. So I'm going to grab these contacts here. And I'm going to paste them out here. So we got contacts. It doesn't have to go inside the app. So I have contacts. So I have an array of 3 objects. Okay, each object has an ID, a name, an email, an avatar URL. This is a local image, so I'm going to have to copy that locally. I should probably go get a URL for it. And it also has a type, good guy or bad guy. I'm gonna actually go get these, I'll go grab these later. Actually, I'll copy over the images right now. For these images, I'm gonna put them in, actually, we'll just get the URLs. That's probably better. Captain America image 7. I found these yesterday. I'm gonna have to go pick them up again. Sorry that you have to. Oh, this one looks pretty cool. So you could just pick whatever. It doesn't really matter. Okay. Copy image address. It may not look exactly like the way I have it in there, but it should look fine. Copy image address. There we go. It's a PNG. Iron Man. Grab one over here. Ooh, this one looks pretty cool. So copy image address. That's really massive. Is there a smaller one? Yeah. I don't know how these are going to look, but again, it doesn't really matter. This is just an example, and we'll grab one for Thanos. This is the one I used, so that works out well. Copy image address, just paste it in here. Okay, cool. All right, so we have some data. Okay, now our goal is to use this to create a contacts list. And again, the way we did it yesterday totally works, right? So the way we did it this morning totally works. And it would look something like this. I'm just gonna go grab some CSS as well. I have some CSS I can use, okay? Don't worry too much about the CSS for now. In the future, I'll give you probably CSS. So I'm just gonna grab some CSS here. I'm gonna paste it in here, and we're just gonna say that's good. As long as I follow my method for building these contacts, I should be okay. Okay, so standard way that we could do it would be something like this. I'm going to have an ordered list. Okay, so we're going to return an ordered list because this is going to be an ordered list of contacts. Okay, and again, I'm working in JSX. I'm returning this from my function app. Okay, don't worry about the naming yet. I'm going to just write this out, and then we're going to start making some changes to it. Okay, I'm going to give it a class name so my CSS works properly. It's going to be called contacts list. Okay, and we are going to map over these contacts. Okay, so we're going to say contacts dot map. So we're going to have to do our brackets here. Okay, contacts.map, and we're going to say contact, that, and then we're simply going to return. If we want it to look like this, right? We need an image, we need the name, and we need the email. We also need this, and we're going to need this little div here. Okay, so I have that already done for us. Okay, so I'm just going to paste that into here. Now bear with me, I know I'm doing a little bit of magic here. Okay, it just saves me a little bit of the time, and I'll go through it with you in 1 second. Setting up this up here, good, 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 paste, good. So am I not sharing? Yeah, I am sharing my screen, okay. So over here, I just pasted some stuff, right? We have our contact ID, right? Which is coming from there because it's a list, right? And that's that key thing that we talked about, right? We're looping over all these contacts. So we need a key at the top level, which is going to be the LI, okay? And we're going to pull that ID out of this contact. We have a class name for it because this LI, we want to have a class. We have all these class names for these divs. We have paragraph tags with the name in it, the email address in it. We have a little button for the remove at the end, right? Nothing super fancy. That'll be this button over here. Okay, this is a little bit interesting. Okay, this style tag. Now this style tag is unique because it accepts an object. So normally going into JSX means that we have to put these brackets out, right? Sorry, going into JavaScript from JSX means we have to put these curly braces out. But the style tag is unique because it accepts an object of styles. And so to insert that object, we need to have, right, this is an object at the same time. So we go into JavaScript, and then inside JavaScript, we're putting an object in there. That's why you get these double curly braces. And then we can say background image. And then, right, so if we want to put more style tags, we can say comma, and then color, colon, white, right? Or something like that. That it takes an object of style tags. Okay, and we've seen this approach before when we were doing style tags in JavaScript. Okay, but this is the only really weird thing that you're going to see, the double curly braces, and that's because we're putting an object inside a style tag. Okay, so nothing crazy here going on. Let's save this and take a look. And then, yeah. Let's save this and take a look here. Save, and yeah.
We have an object inside an object for style only, right?
We have a what?
An object inside an object.
Nope, this is an object inside JavaScript. The outer ones, the red curly braces are saying, go from JSX into JavaScript, just like here or here or here. And inside of that, it's an object. So it's not an object inside an object, it's an object inside of us going into JavaScript. Right, we want to write JavaScript in here. And in order for us to write JavaScript in here, just like over here, we have to put curly braces.
That is like a container, right?
This is like a container. Yeah. We can write any JavaScript we want between these two curly braces. And we want to write an object. It's like doing this. It's like doing that. But It's just inline because we want to be able to use his contact in there. And if we start this, cannot resolve arrow back.svg in class sample source. Oh, that's okay. I'm going to take this one out. Got a couple little errors in here. We'll deal with this stuff later. Okay. And we end up with this. Oh yeah, hey, that's not bad. Those turned out okay. Cool. Okay. Oh, we're missing our little X button, but whatever. I don't really care about that. I'll deal with that tomorrow. That's a tomorrow thing anyways. Okay. Which means I probably don't need this button thing right here. And actually it saves me a little bit of a headache anyways. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so one thing you'll notice, I put my contacts outside of the function this time. That's fine. Right? This is, again, this is just JavaScript, right? It can go inside the function. It can go outside the function. It's just JavaScript, right? It just has a different scope at that point. Now, what we're going to do is something totally new. This is typically not how we would break this down. Typically, we break this down into something called components. We break our app down into something called components. And this is something that we're going to learn how to do over time, is identify components. Now, this is going to be a little bit strange today because it may seem like this is totally fine and we don't need to break this down into components. However, we're going to do it anyways because it's a really simple piece of data set to do this with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this out into a component. So I had mentioned the word component yesterday. I had said app is a component. React is constructed of components. And the idea behind a component is that every single component has the data and the information to manage itself. It's about breaking a page down into small components. For example, if we looked at this page here, we can break this down into different components. We can say this box, this header at the top, this is a component. This body, this is a component. This sidebar over here, this is a component. Even within this header up here, we have another component. So we have a header component, and inside there we have a search component. Now the idea is if I create a component in React like this, like a search component, I should be able to take that component and put it anywhere I want on the page. I can put it in the header like it is, or I can just put it out here. And the component contains all the information that it needs to work, okay? It is not dependent on anything else, okay? It has all the information it needs on its own. We'll explore that a lot more. Let's just see how, from a programmatic perspective, more complicated, this is a component, make 5 components, make 3 components, okay? And you'll start to naturally see how this works.
Before you start a little more about components, I read in the material, it says something about loosely coupled units. I don't understand all 3 words, loosely, coupled, and units.
Okay, so, well, those are not separate, those are separately. So the idea behind loosely coupled. So we had talked about this before. Loose coupling is a concept that we want to try to adhere to. Loose coupling is an excellent concept for all programming. The idea is not dependent on another thing. So we have function one and function. Coupling is that, for example, if we go back to our buses thing, or we go back to any of those other things, I had mentioned several times how like, hey, yeah, it's cool if I called function one, right? And I pass a bus stop ID. Let's say it takes stop ID, okay? And then it all schedules it,
whatever the address is.
Stop ID, right? Using that. And then it calls function two with some info from that it got from the fetch, okay? And some info. Now, this is tightly coupled. The idea that function one automatically calls function two creates this concept of tight coupling. And that like function two is function one is tightly coupled to function two.
Okay.
You see, because they're tied together,
Right.
because one of them's calling the other one.
Right.
The idea that what we want to do is we want to create functions that are independent, that if I took function two out, function one would not break, right? In this case, if I took function two out, function one breaks. And imagine in a bigger program, if we had all these things that were attached together, tightly coupled, and I took one of them out, and it caused this to break, and then this breaking causes that to break, and then that breaking causes the other thing to break, and they're all tied together, then it's a disaster whenever we have to change anything.
Right.
So it's much better is if we don't couple them together. So tightly coupled, right? They're tightly coupled. Loosely coupled means they're
one
not.
change doesn't break.
That's the idea. One change should not destroy our entire system. Okay. So that way, because the idea is we go into our program and make a lot of changes frequently. And so when we change one thing, we don't want that to set off a chain reaction of 300 other changes. It would be nice if we could just go and change that one thing and maybe two other things that are affected, and that's it.
Okay.
We don't want that crazy chain reaction. And that's where coupling comes into play. Now, when it's talking about units, it's talking about this is a function is a unit or a class is a unit. It's just like tightly coupled things.
So
units, sorry, go ahead.
So in that case, this unit is calling component. I'm talking about components.
Yeah. In this case, the unit that we're talking about is functions, but it could be classes. It could be a variety of things.
Okay, thank you.
But that is an excellent concept that we want to be applying to all of our programs. Is that we don't want to create this chain reaction of events, and so we want to loosely couple things. And so that's where components come into play. So the idea, like I said, the idea of a search being its own component means it's not tied to anything else. This search is not necessarily tied to this header. It's a component that's rendered, that's inside of another component, but we could just as easily have put it up here, or we could put it both places, right? And it's not tied to it being in the sidebar or up in the header. So let's see how we create a component, shall we? So we're going to create a new component, and we're going to create a component for a superhero. Superhero kind of has a bad connotation though, because that's assuming they're all good guys. But we've got a bad guy in here, but he's a super villain. So let's just call them all superheroes, okay? So we're going to create a component for superheroes. This is how we would do it. So over here in our SRC, we're going to right click and we're going to create a new file. And we're going to call the file whatever it is that we're making. And I mean, this is a contacts list. So let's not call it a superhero. Let's call it a contact. Contact.js. This is going to represent a contact. One single contact. Okay. Now, all of our components, all of these new files that we create in React, they all require that we import React, all of them. Because we want to be able to use React in this file. So we're going to have to add that in. In addition, if we had a unique CSS file just for this one, we would probably want to add that as well, contact.css, which probably means I should create contact.css, right? So the idea behind this is this CSS styles this contact independently. And again, it is not dependent on where it is. That's the idea of why we would have individual CSS for every component, because they're loosely coupled, they're independent. We can take them and move them anywhere. And so we don't have this giant CSS file. Each component has its own CSS that it uses to render itself. Okay. Now we write our function, contact. Okay. And we now do our export default contact because it matches this, matches that function. Okay, so that's how this is working here, matching that function. Okay, and it's in this contact function we had mentioned before that we must return JSX. Now this is the JSX we want. We want this contact, this one contact component represents one contact, bloop, one of these. Each one of these things, these white things, that is a component. We're going to call that a component. Now, I don't have to make 3 components. I make one component and I reuse it 3 times, right? Okay, so what I want to do is I want to take this stuff over here and I want to insert it into here, right? So I have now, don't worry about where we're getting this information from yet. We're going to get it. Okay, let's just yeah, we'll take it out for now. We'll come back. Okay, so we have a component and this represents a single contact, right? If we look at this JSX, this is the JSX that represents, this is the markup that represents one of these components. Cool. How do we integrate it with this now? Okay. And for this, we're going to just do it really simply to start. Okay, so we have our contacts list and we want to use this component that we built that's specific for each contact. So what we do is we pass down data. So this is much in the same way that we pass data into functions using arguments and parameters in regular JavaScript, right? Right, like if I have a function and I want to pass data into it, I need to pass my data when I call that function, right? Okay, we are doing the same thing here in React, except the language is a little bit different and the syntax is a little bit different, okay? So first of all, one of the first things I need to do, I need to connect all of these together. So if we go over to index.js, I connected app to index.js so that index.js can read app and can pull information from it. I need to do the same thing over here with contacts. So contacts, contact.js or contact, the contact component is going to act as a child of app in this case. So we need to import it. okay? So we're importing it. Now we don't need to connect them both ways. I don't need to connect contact to app and app to contact. I just need to connect the parent, in this case, app, to the child. Okay, contact does not need to know about its parent. The parent needs to know about the child. Okay. And much in the same way that we did this, because app is a component, we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to say contact. And we have 3 contacts. So we're going to say it 3 times. Now, the one thing we're missing is being able to provide the data into here to properly fill out our information. Now, see, as you can see, I'm running into some problems. Okay, I've got some errors, and that's okay. So we had this information in here that we wanted to be able to accept, kind of like a parameter to this function, and then use. And we do that through something called props. Props or properties are the equivalent of arguments. So we can pass data down into this component using something called props. And they look just like HTML attributes. So it looks like this. What is this? Contacts. And then on the other end, so you see, we give it a name, whatever name we want, and we give it a value. Again, this is JSX, so we need to escape the JSX and go into JavaScript. We go contacts, we grab the first contact, we put the name. How do we accept props? We accept some value up here. So we put in some sort of value up here. It could be anything, right? This is just our parameter, just like any other function. And then inside of here is an object with all the props in it. So we essentially get this. Let's just get rid of this. Get rid of this for now. And this should automatically work. So I removed everything except for this one prop that we pulled in, props.name, because I passed it in under name. They all get combined together and passed through to the component. So this is essentially how we pass parameters down to components, okay, which is this, and it gets rendered. It's inside here, props. We can call this anything. I can just call it A if I want. But you'll usually see it's called props. Okay, these are called props anyways, so that's why we call props. And it gets rendered. So if I wanted to add more, like the other things, right? I would have to do. So this is props.name, props.email, props.avatar URL, props.contact ID. And so then over here on the other side, I would have to pass those in individually. So email equals right? So we're going to do the same thing. Contacts.email. And so now the email appears. Okay, and we repeat the process over and over again. You're going to see this is starting to get long. This is going to start to get long. So avatar URL equals process again. So it's not uncommon to do something. I'll show you right away. And what else do we need? Oh, and then we need the key. And key. I can't use key because it's reserved. So it's going to try to put a key on here, I think. So instead, I'm going to have to do something else. But what you can also do is you could just do this. You don't have to pass each one individually. I can just do this. Pass the entire character, right? I can pass individual ones, or I can pass the whole thing. If I pass the whole thing, then it's props.character.id because I passed this entire object in, right? Which is probably better, right? So you can, every instance is going to be different. You may just want to pass in one piece of information or two pieces of information, or you might want to pass in the whole object. It's really up to you what you want to do. Yeah, it's really up to you what you want to do. So in this case, we're just going to pass the whole thing. Okay, contact character, and then over here, we're coming in with props.character.id. And so it's everything that was props is now going to be props.character now. And we come over here, and here we go, everything's rendered. So each one of these is a component. Questions on this?
Is there something that you can do except that everything? So let's say there are like 10 pieces of information on each character. You want 9.
If that was the case, I would just pass in everything. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it'd be worth it to reduce it.
Mm.
Yeah. Is there a way? Yeah, I'm sure there's a way. I can't slice. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, like a really easy way to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, typically if you need 9 out of 10 or 99 out of 100, you just pass in the whole thing and then just use what you need.
And one more, can you just loop it? It looks like it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the next piece is that like, why am I doing this 3 times? What if this grows? Then I have to add another one as well? No, I should just loop it. So it would look like this. So we go into our thing, our JS, contact.map, contact, and it actually looks really nice. There we go. Right here is our component. It's automatically returning to map because it's the first argument. We're passing in the contact. We're mapping over it. This becomes an array. And we're done. There we go. It actually looks really, really good. Now, if it doesn't end up looking like this, if you have many, many different props, then you're probably going to want to break this up into multiple lines, in which case it's just a matter of playing with some curly braces and parentheses and stuff like that, possibly a return statement. But as long as you understand how all of this JavaScript works, you're fine. And all of this JavaScript is stuff we've already covered except for the JSX. The only piece that's new here is JSX and components. Okay. Now, we've got one more piece before we keep going, before we stop. Any questions on props as a way to pass data down to components or creating components? Okay. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I just got a question about the CSS. Can you go back to code, please? Yeah. Yeah, like, cause I see there's a contact.css, but it didn't put anything in there.
No, I didn't put anything in it. In a real world scenario, you would put the CSS. Actually, so really what I would do is I would take this CSS here, contacts list CSS. No, actually, contact avatar, I'd put in there. So that should go in here. So that should go out of here. Contact details should go in there. Details P should go in there. And there should be contact list and contact list item. Actually, no, that should stay here. Contact list item should go in here too. And that's gone. And these are gone. So technically, you would want to have the CSS that belongs to each of these inside that CSS. So now this is literally a component, right? This is totally individual. It is technically not tied to app. Yes, app is currently using this contact, but I can use it on any other page on this application, anywhere else. I just need to do import contact and make sure I pass it a contact. It has all the CSS to render itself. It has all the data to render itself. It knows how to manage itself. All I need to do is provide it with the information. It just so happens that in this case, the information is coming from here. So talking about loosely coupled, yes, I'm using it here, but this is not the only spot that I need to use it, or I could potentially use it. And again, this is a very contrived, very small example. So it may not make sense, but if you were to think of this in the same context of the website that we looked at earlier, the React website, with this search, it contains all the CSS and all the data that it needs to manage itself. I can literally just render it as a component somewhere else, and no problem, it works. Okay, that is the principle that we're trying to adhere to.
Okay, so which means like if you don't put anything in the contact.css, but the contact.js can use the parent CSS, right?
It can, yeah, it can, assuming it's ready. Yeah, like technically you could put everything at the top level CSS file, but it's not ideal. You do kind of want to break it down into components because you do want to kind of create this CSS goes with this component. So if I ever said, I need you to change how this avatar looks, I don't want it to be circular. I want it to be square. Where would you go and look? Would you go and look in the 1,000 lines of app.css? Or would you just head over to contact.css because you know, oh, this is a component. It has its own CSS file. I can just go look in that CSS and I can see this contact avatar. Yep. And let's do a border radius. Let's just get rid of that. And boom, now they're square. Right? So it's really, again, it's about organization too, right? So because it's well organized, we know exactly where to go to make any modifications. If I want to change the name, if I want to change the email, if I want to change what it looks like, we know exactly where to go. There's no question about where we need to go to do that, as long as everyone else is adhering to this structure. And that's part of the importance of having structure in an application, is now if I gave this to you, you would know exactly where to go and look. There wouldn't be, it's not just like this free form jazz impromptu type of programming where we just make up any functions, we just give them any names. It's structured, right? The app, the name of the file, the function, how we export, what we're returning, the way we organize our CSS, we're providing structure to all this. Yes, it looks like way more work, but big picture, long run, way less work.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I know that was more than you asked for.
Yeah.
Okay.
And John, can we use classes as well, like extend it in the components instead of functions?
Yes. Okay, so I wasn't going to talk about that till tomorrow, but I guess some of you are doing some good reading. So let's talk about this. So there are two ways to declare components. One, these are called, and this is something that Daniel mentioned yesterday, this is called a functional component, a stateless functional component. It contains what we call no state. We'll talk more about state tomorrow. So this idea of stateful and statelessness, we'll talk about tomorrow. But this is called a stateless functional component. The alternative is a standard component, which you might see being written like this.
I saw a lot of that and got confused.
Yeah, me as well.
Okay. So this, so it's not totally equal because obviously one's stateful and one's stateless. Now, when we're doing this, we know that classes do not have return functions. They have methods. So now we have to add a method. The one mandatory method of a class component, class-based component, is the render method, mandatory. And the render method is essentially the same thing as this function. Okay, so this is a stateful component as opposed to a stateless functional component. Okay, so class app extends React component. So we're back into the classes now. Okay, it has a method called render, mandatory, must have a method called render. That is the only method that is required, but it's mandatory. And it is mandatory that that method returns JSX, which is essentially just like this, right? This function contact must return JSX. Okay, so you will see this, and we can change this one into that too if we wanted to, which will change how we accept props. This class.contact extends React.component. Alternatively, you might also see this. Okay, that might be something that you see, where they're just pulling in one thing, component, instead of everything from React. So again, like I said, you're going to look at documentation. You're going to see a million different things. So I like to do it like this. It's nice and explicit. Okay. And we need to put a render in here. And then inside this render, we can return this stuff. Okay, so that works. Now, props does not exist anymore. It is not props. It is now called this.props. Inside of a class type of component, it's called this.props. even though I didn't say the word props anywhere, it is automatically inserted into a property called this.props. So now if we go back over here, everything's working again. So this class contact extends React component with the render function and the return is the equivalent of function contact return. Okay, so these two things are the same. You will actually see this a lot. You'll also see this a lot. You'll see both of them a lot. And the reason why you would see one over the other is just about the types, what they're doing with it. They choose one over the other. And they'll mix and match. And you can mix and match, right? It was working fine before I changed this. So if I go back to what we had before, if I go back to what we had before, I'm mixing and matching stateless functional component, class component, and everything works fine. No problem. Okay. And last but not least, one more piece. We're not quite where I said we wanted to be, right? We wanted to separate these, good guys and bad guys. Any ideas?
We'll probably have to make a div for each with a class so we know where to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if statement.
Maybe. We could do if statements. If statements don't really look very good inside of here. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do two OLs. Outside the OLs, I'm going to put an H2 tag. I'm going to say bad guys. We could put if statements though. You can use ternaries in here to show and hide things depending on states. Like if there are no good guys, don't show the header good guys. If there are no bad guys, don't show the header bad guys. We won't do that right now. Good guys, but you could, right? And that would just be like something like this, right? You go into, so A greater than 5 greater than 4, 3, do this, otherwise do nothing.
You switch the question mark with a colon.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd have to do this. Sorry, what did I do?
The question mark should be where the colon
is.
The
Yeah.
colon
Thank
should,
you.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like doing something like that you can do, which will only show certain things. I'm gonna have to double check my syntax on this. I think I'm a little bit backwards, but you can do stuff like that. So you can figure out, you can write if statements and stuff to determine, to determine things. Well, I'll show you that later. Okay. But in this case,
oh yeah, we could, can't we map it out from the contact array?
well, we are mapping, but we can filter it.
Yeah, okay, that's okay.
Right? So
Yeah.
so a common pattern, just like this map is a common pattern, it's also a common pattern to filter. Okay? Actually, you filter and then you map. Filter reduces the size of the array, and then we convert that array. Right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to reduce the size of the array. We want to separate this into good guys and bad guys. So we're going to end up with an array of size 2 and an array of size 1. Okay, so over here, we're going to say contacts.filter, contact, contact.type equals good guy. And then we're going to map. So context.filter reduces this array to only this. It's only grabbing the good guys. And then we take that new array and we map with it. So it's not uncommon for us to chain map to filter. Pretty common. Okay, so we are filtering, reducing the size of the data set, and then it's that new data set that we're printing out. And then down here, we do the same process, except we're filtering for bad guys. And I have a error somewhere.
Yeah, you need a wrap for the whole thing, I think.
Oh yeah, you need a wrapper for the whole thing. Yeah, thank you. So you could see, you could only return one element. So I'm just gonna wrap it in an empty one, because I don't actually want to I could put this in a div if I wanted to, but like, let's pretend I didn't want to. Why would I just insert a div if I didn't want to have a div there, right? Just for the sake of saying that it has to be one element. I can just return an empty element in JSX. And so that's considered a single element. So now we end up with this organized using filter and map, components and props.
So the empty wrap is not going to be created in.
No, and nothing in HTML. No, it doesn't even show up. So yeah, so you see your OL here, and all of this stuff is rendered into root, and there's nothing in between root and this H2. So this never showed up. Nothing's there.
And in reading, I studied about React fragment as well, using React fragment if you want to remove like a div.
We won't be covering fragments.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You don't need, you won't need fragments for this. Any other questions? So what do you think about this? So again, like, this is not something that you're going to always do, but you will see this very often. This concept of map, this concept of filter, creating these components, okay? Something that you'll see very often. Okay. Let's take a look at the exercise then. So it's not identical, but it's very similar. So you can always come back and refer to this. So we have some reading, obviously. The reading, as you can see, the reading is super important. I can tell some of you have been doing your reading and you're asking really, really good questions. And yeah, the reading can kind of like, it can kind of not be totally identical to what I'm doing, but it's very, very similar, okay? And it will highlight a lot of the pieces of information, like the, like writing components like this, or stateless functional components. It talks about both of them. It talks about keys, it talks about lists, does talk about map. I have a little piece in here that I've linked to that talks about map. So you've got a couple readings. Both of them, I would say, are mandatory. Components and props, lists and keys. How to deal with lists or collections, how to manage keys. Components and props, exactly what we covered today. Okay. Exercise number 2. So exercise number 2, we're going to be just extending what we have yesterday. If you want to use my existing solution, I have a GitHub repo. You can just clone this. It doesn't have the node modules, but all you have to do is an npm install. You can just clone this, do an npm install, you get a starting point from yesterday's solution. Okay, the stuff I covered this morning, it's got all the CSS, it's got everything in it already. So you just grab this if you want, okay? Here's what you're gonna need to do. You are going to create an application composed of 4 components. A header component, a main or app component that will render all the restaurants, just like what we did with the contacts, a like app component that rendered all the contacts. A restaurant component, just like we did, we had the contacts component, and then a footer component. In addition, your restaurants should be grouped using similar header to the ones displayed in the sample mockup. You should use filter and map to accomplish this, as demonstrated in the class. I've updated the restaurant data below here, so you now have ratings, okay, and cuisines and costs, which we'll be building on. You will need to write your own CSS if you want it to look the same. Luckily, I didn't make any major changes. And this is what the sample should, I'm trying to get you to make something like this. So you can see we have a header component up at the top. We have a footer component down at the bottom. And we have restaurants organized into 3 categories. Great, okay, and not so great. I apologize if I've offended anyone with my choice of restaurants and whether or not I find them okay or not okay. These are picked at random, okay? So obviously, in order to organize them, we need to have some piece of information that determines whether or not they're a good rating, a medium rating, or a low rated restaurant. So all the things that we practiced today, you're going to implement. You're going to create multiple components. You're going to map, you're going to filter, you're going to pass some props. If you want to practice creating components with classes, I would encourage that, because actually we'll have to do that tomorrow. So yeah, any questions?
I'm sure I'll have some, but not right now.
Okay, try to get your questions in before 3:15 if you can.
John, do we have to write CSS for this as well?
Yeah, pretty minimal. If you clone my repository, most of the CSS is already there. You're just going to have to write super simple CSS. Again, my focus is not to get you to write CSS, but I do want to kind of add a little bit of styling to it since it's a little bit easier on the eyes. So I'd recommend a little bit of CSS, but it's not hard. If you get to the focus is not CSS, the focus is React. So if you're able to do everything and you don't get around to doing the CSS, that's fine. But, you know, okay. All right. So how are you feeling now? Better? Worser?
Better than yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday is a tough, that first day is always really tough. And I'm trying to, I spent a lot of my time last night trying to think about how I might be able to make it a little bit easier of a transition. So that way we can actually walk away on day 1, being able to write a little bit of React, but not feel so overwhelmed at like how big of a first day it is. So I haven't figured out a solution yet.
John,
yeah.
You want to know something that kind of helped me wrap my head around React?
Sure.
It's actually when you did the last assignment 2, the solution, and you really put an emphasis on, I guess, like functional programming and kind of moving all the different jobs you're doing into smaller functions. I really just took away from that and take a look at it, and a lot of the functions themselves, if you break it up properly and organize when you're writing, a lot of those functions can just become components, and that's kind of what helped me connect the dots.
Oh, yeah, interesting. And actually, one of the things I like to do, and I haven't done this in the past, so to give you a little bit of a background of this course, okay, and why it may feel a little bit different than some other courses. A lot of this course that I'm teaching right now was all driven by videos and other information that was already provided to me. However, I found that the videos were getting out of date, and we're trying to pull back on a little bit of that stuff. And so this is the last course that I have not yet completely updated, and so it might have a little bit of a different look and feel to it. But one of my goals was to take one of the applications that we built in the past and update it to be React. So I was thinking maybe the budget calculator would be a good one. That's a good application to make React. And so then you get to see exactly like how it would apply to an older application, or even any of the applications that we did last time. I think we could do the Winnipeg Transit one. The weather one would be a very good React one. It'd be fine. It'd be pretty, actually that one would be pretty easy to do as a React app. We could actually do that one if we wanted to. But yeah, something a little bit more interactive, right? The weather one isn't really interactive, but something a little bit more interactive. And then you could see how it works and apply those same concepts of functions and adding more functions to our programming. So hopefully we'll be able to get there in time. I'm a little bit behind. Normally I'm about a week and a half ahead, a week ahead with material. I'm operating on 2 days ahead right now. So I have material, it's just not what I would consider the best stuff, in my opinion. I've always wanted to make it better, but we'll see. Got lots to do. Okay, so there you have it. Any questions, let me know. Ping Zach. I'm sure Zach would love some React questions, okay? Do any of you connect with Zach?
Yes, I did. He loved React. He do give a very long answers.
Okay, good. Yeah, I want to make sure that he's earning his keep, you know, that he's really working for his money. I get worried that he doesn't work hard enough. So
you guys don't talk? Are you just saying it for fun, or? He's really hardworking, like amazing.
I don't believe you. I think he's asking you to say that. Yeah. I can't trust anyone. I have to see it. If I can't see him, I don't believe it. So I'm trying to get him to get a video camera installed at his house so I can actually monitor him while he's working.
Is the school paying for that?
I'll just do it, and then I'll charge it to the school and see if it slips through the cracks and see if they pay me back for it.
Just a nanny cam or something?
Yeah, like I'll send him a little teddy bear for like a gift or something. Yeah. Oh, what else was I going to say? There's one other thing. Yeah, no, I know Zach is hardworking. Oh shoot, I forget. That's okay. So yeah, just make sure that you connect with him or me if you have any questions. Try to do it before 3:15. Like, I'm flexible, but like I am active and here, sitting at my desk, except for lunch, until 3:15. So like I'm just sitting around, not idle, I'm working, but like I'm available. So ping me then. After 3:15, you know, I do like to try to create that separation. As you know, I most of the time still answer, but sometimes I won't just because I don't feel like it. But before 3:15, it's obligation. I feel like, yes, I'm absolutely going to do that. So, all right.
Hey, John, it's not related to the course. I just wonder, have you tried the new release, the Windows Terminal and the Windows Package Manager?
Am I not using the new Windows Terminal?
I think they just released the new one with the recently upgrade. It's called Windows Terminal 1.0.
Oh yeah. I'm using, okay, so they are releasing, today we're on the 26th. I read this morning, I literally checked this out this morning. On the 28th, they're releasing Windows version build 2004. I'm on 1918 or something. With that comes WSL2, which is an update to, so okay. If you're good and you're happy and you want to go eat lunch, go eat lunch. If you want to hear me babble for 5 minutes, you can stick around. So I'm currently using something called WSL, which is called Windows Subsystem for Linux. So I'm actually using Ubuntu Linux in Windows, and it is built for this. Microsoft has built this. Okay, it's way better than Git Bash. It's a pure Linux install. It's actually not super hard to install. It's actually pretty easy. There's tons of tutorials online, and it gives you full access to everything. So this is WSL, and I'm using Windows. Oh, I'll show you. Sorry. So this is Windows Terminal. About Windows Terminal version. Oh, this is version 1. But this was a beta. It might have gone from beta into version 1. It's really, really good. I love it. You can open PowerShell, command prompt, or I'm running Ubuntu. You can have Git Bash on here too. It's configured with JSON. It's spectacular. They're supposed to release a new version of this as well as a new version of WSL, which is what I'm running here, my Ubuntu, the little penguin here, on May 28th. So I'm pretty excited about that because apparently this has been in the works for a long time, for years, and it's finally making it out. Apparently it's much faster and better. It gives you a sense of kind of going back to a Mac, but not. I still miss my Mac, but it's okay. So if any of you want to check out WSL and use WSL for this, I would highly recommend it if you're on Windows. WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. Okay, super popular. Right here. What is the Windows Subsystem for Linux? Super good, really easy, step-by-step. Install WSL, update to WSL 2. Okay, lots of stuff, really, really great stuff. And it gives you a full Linux inside Windows where you can access all your Windows stuff. So, yeah. Thanks for asking, Yushin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for your help today.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. That was a little bit tricky. Sometimes we're getting to the point now where the computer stuff that we're doing can be tricky. And sometimes it's like, I don't know why it's not working. If we were in class, I would have sat down beside you and I would not have been able to pull myself away. But because we're not, it's a lot harder for me because I can't see everything and I can't touch everything. And so it's just way harder for me to help. So,
that Stack Overflow suggested, I cleared the cache. It was stupid. I downloaded so many unnecessary things.
You know what? And I've gone to the point where I've reinstalled Windows, or I've reinstalled Mac OS, or I've reinstalled my entire operating system. Sometimes it's crazy. And we'd be at work and we're both using the exact same computers and it works on mine and it doesn't work on the other person's, right? And that's that idea of it works on my machine, which is very tricky.